Just a quick reminder of our ground rules. Both candidates will begin with a 3-minute opening, and they'll have a 3-minute closing at the end, and they'll alternate who begins that. We did have a coin flip, official coin flip, and Colin Allred elected to defend the North Goal. No, he will begin, followed by Chairman Sessions, and then we will go back and forth between the questions, obviously each one. And for each question, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. The other will have 2 minutes, and then the person that answered the question first will have 30 seconds in addition to rebut if they'd like to, before we move on to the next question. So the only other ground rules we have is to be nice, no personal attacks, and no talking over each other. And we do have Courtney here keeping track of the time, and once the time is up, you can finish your sentence, but as I've said before, at some debates, I can detect long compound sentences. So if I hear a comma, I'm going to ask you to stop. So no 3-minute last sentences. But again, we're excited that you're here, and I think we start with our opening statements, and that would be Colin Allred begins.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to the Chambers and the League of Women Voters for hosting this important event. I just want to begin by acknowledging some of the dangerous things we've been seeing in the news recently with these homemade explosive devices being sent to prominent Democrats and other members of the media, and just say that I think it's so important that we have events like this where we talk about the issues, where we talk about where we need to go and talk about the policies that are involved, and not demonize each other, and make sure that we understand that we're all Americans, we're all on the same side, we should be pulling in the same direction. My pathway here to this morning is an unusual one. I was born and raised here by a single mother who was a public school teacher, and I relied on this community to do everything that I've done. I relied on the public schools here, going to Hillcrest High School. I relied on the community organizations like the YMCA that meant so much to me. I relied on people in this community. And that has informed my opinion and my belief that government doesn't create outcomes. But what it can do and what it should do is help create opportunities. The opportunities that were made available to me were good public schools, an after-school care program that was funded by federal block grants, pre-K that I went to that was funded by federal funding, investments that helped me give back to this community, allowed me to have an NFL career, to become a civil rights lawyer, to work with President Obama, to do all the things that I've done, to allow me to be a productive citizen. And this morning, I really want to get into how we can continue our economic growth here in North Texas and make sure that we are moving in the right direction. Because I think there's more that goes into being pro-business and pushing and helping the economy than tax cuts and just limiting regulation. We want to have a tax and regulatory system that is fair for our companies, fair for our businesses, but we also need to make sure that they have a workforce that is skilled, that can fill the roles that they need. We have thousands of skilled jobs that are available here in North Texas that we cannot fill. We need to make sure that we have and are continuing to invest in our infrastructure. We're growing extremely rapidly here. We need to keep up with that so that our businesses can get their products to market, so that their folks who want to buy those products can get to those places, and that we can continue to grow in a way that is sustainable. And we have so many things that go into creating a holistic atmosphere in which businesses can thrive. Part of that is making sure that people feel like this is a place where they can get ahead, where they can succeed, where they won't be treated differently based on what they look like or where they come from or who they are. And I've talked to students at UTD who are doing amazing things with AI and robotics and other things, who are worried that in this country we're moving in a direction that might not be welcoming to them. We have to reverse those things, make sure that this is the best place to start and grow a new business. And thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak with you this morning.
Congressman Sessions.
Scott, thank you very much, and Colin, thank you. It's a delight to be back here. I've been coming to this building since 1989. I served as chairman of the board of the East Dallas Chamber and have been involved in chamber activity for a long time. I am proud to say that I have received the Spirit of Enterprise Award, which is the Chamber Award, for 21 years now. My opponent will never achieve one of these. My opponent will never achieve one of these because all it takes is a C to get one of these, but he will get the 100% award from the AFL-CIO. And that is embodied in his policies that he deeply believes in. And I think it's important for us to recognize that to get economic development and to have opportunity, that means that the rules of the game need to be prepared and ready for you to achieve these things. The previous administration had a GDP growth rate of about 1.2 to 1.5% over 8 years. That meant that we were not growing jobs, that those opportunities that my opponent talks about were not available. You would get your master's and go to work at a Starbucks. And the bottom line is that economic growth, this is a true statement, because we gave away millions of jobs overseas to someone else. The essence of a lot of this is healthcare oriented, and it was part of what the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act was not about healthcare. It was about limiting the free enterprise system. It was about harming the growth of business. The HR 676, which is the Medicare for All bill that has been touted by the Democratic Party, I would take us to Section 104. It is unlawful for a private health insurer to sell health insurance coverage that duplicates the benefits under this act. And that is all of healthcare, including going to an optometrist and a dentist. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gotten to the point where the parties have separated themselves off the size and scope of government. I want to be on the side of the chamber that is for the free enterprise system. We are the epicenter here in Dallas of not just the free enterprise system, but really of growth and opportunity. We recognize that in California, the same policies that my opponent subscribes to has thrown jobs out of the state, and that is why they have 55,000 homeless people in Los Angeles. I want Dallas to be the epicenter of freedom and opportunity, and I am a chamber supporter, and that is why I will continue to win this award for each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Congressman Sessions, the first question will go to you, and it's on healthcare, as you just discussed. Healthcare is one of the top issues cited by voters as one of the important factors in their vote. Do you support continuation of the Affordable Care Act, and what specific reforms do you propose to address the costs and access to healthcare?
Thank you very much. Scott, this chamber knows that I have a bill called the World's Greatest Healthcare Plan that allows Obamacare to continue. It is an option, but it also allows competition. And that competition means that any American that does not receive the pre-tax contribution from their employer will receive a tax credit. A tax credit that is available January 1st of every year. It's $3,000 for an individual adult, $1,500 for a child, a family for $9,000, allowing them to buy into a health care plan that would be a group policy just like I used to have at AT&T. It would allow them the first $9,000 to buy in and to have a program, an insurance plan that would mean that they would, if they chose to stay away from an emergency room and go to the best and most effective and cost-effective type of health care, they could go see their own doctor. This is a model that we must have for the future, where we have options available, but where we allow equity in the marketplace, allowing every single American the same chances that I had when I was at AT&T. Sorry, I don't know whether that's working or not.
I think we need to hold it up here. One thing is wired.
Good luck.
So, Mr. Colin Allred.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This is the number one issue that I talk to people about, is healthcare. And my wife and I were at the doctor yesterday hearing my soon-to-be son's heartbeat, and it just drove home for me the importance of this issue, and I think that everyone should have access to high-quality healthcare. My opponent has voted over 50 times to repeal the ACA. Mm-hmm. Let's be very clear. I don't understand and don't really care what his personal plans are or what he thinks is the world's greatest healthcare plan. And I don't care about non-binding resolutions that might protect people with pre-existing conditions. What I care about is his voting record, which is extremely consistent. Over 50 times he has voted to repeal the ACA with its protections for pre-existing conditions with no plan to replace it. He has proudly touted that position, touted that they would repeal and replace, repeal and replace. And what was shown in this last congressional session was that there was no plan to replace. and that we are one thumbs down from John McCain away from having just the repeal. This is an extremely personal issue that affects so many people so deeply. And it's one that I think we deserve a member of Congress who will speak honestly to us, who will talk to us about their vote, who won't come to a town hall a few months after getting reelected and say to everyone there, your issue is that you don't know how to listen. People are listening and their eyes are open and they understand that we have a Congress that was so close to taking away health care from over 20 million Americans. And that's not my estimate, that's the estimate of the Congressional Budget Office. That's the estimate that you can Google and look up yourself. You can see what the congressman's record has been. My plan is very different. I want to lower costs for you and your family. I want to lower the cost of prescription drugs. I want to give you and your family more options through a Medicare buy-in to allow you, if you so choose, to have access to a low-cost, quality government health care that will allow you to compete with private insurance companies, will drive a virtuous cycle of competition that will help us all and will lower costs for all of us.
So Congressman, you have 30 seconds to respond.
So we get this right, it's Democrats that took $700 billion out of Medicare. It is a senior geriatric program. It is not made for women and children and families. It is difficult to find a doctor because it reimburses 40% less than employer-provided health care. And Colin, you can't have it two ways. I have to read your bills. You can't blow mine off. I read your bills. I know what's in them. And just because you don't want to understand mine is not a reason to try and diss me today.
Next question, starting with Mr. Allred, is about the budget. So the 2018 budget deficit was recently announced as growing 17% to $779 billion, the highest since 2012. Growth in spending on defense, as well as Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, and interest on the national debt is part of the discussion of why it's grown. Do you believe that Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, defense need to be reformed and adjusted to address the deficit? If so, what changes would you make? And if not, what would you propose to reduce the deficit?
Well, thank you. I think that this begins, and this conversation must begin with us having a conversation about the irresponsible tax bill that was passed in this last congressional session. One that the Congressional Budget Office has estimated will add $1.9 trillion to the deficit over 10 years, and that has already exploded our deficit as we've seen it so far. And Mitch McConnell has quite honestly stated that to pay for that, we're going to have to go and take money from Social Security and Medicare. I think that's the exactly wrong choice when you consider that this tax bill, with 83 cents out of every dollar, went to the very top of our economy, folks who are doing the very best, and corporations. When in a time of growing inequality in which we need to be working harder to expand from the middle out, making sure that folks who are in the middle class can stay there, the people who are struggling to get into the middle class can get into it. I think that was exactly the wrong decision. We did need a middle class tax cut, and we do need to reduce the tax burden on small businesses. But this tax bill is going to make it very difficult for us to make the critical investments we need. We do need that $1 trillion infrastructure bill that Donald Trump talked about in the campaign, but never actually put forward in these 2 years that they've had of complete Republican control. We do need to invest in job training programs and skill training programs, that we have skilled jobs right now that we can't fill. We have so many investments we need to be making here in North Texas that are critical to our continued growth, to our continued prosperity, that we can't make if we're handing out irresponsible tax bills that only benefit folks at the very top of our economy. And so I don't think it's right to ask folks who have paid into a system their entire career and who are now relying on those programs in their older age as they've retired, to ask them to pay for us to transfer a bunch of wealth to folks who are at the very top. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's who we are here in North Texas. I don't think it's the right thing for our country.
Thank you very much. It was the Republican tax bill that has employed millions of more people that pay into Social Security. Right now in Dallas, Texas, there are 12,000 jobs that pay $16 an hour and have benefits. We can't fill those jobs. They're available today in downtown Dallas. The bottom line is that spending is a problem, but the problem is related to so many of us are retiring. We're growing older. I want to talk about one of the new ideas that I think should be on the table that would help us. And that is, we need to do away with the earnings limit on seniors. We need to allow every single person that would choose to be in the marketplace to come and work and not have an earnings limit. We need to make sure that seniors can take out an an HSA, and that is help them pay their own way for the health care that they would choose to take. But what we did in this tax bill is not give it to the top 1%. We gave it to companies that hire people, that employ people, and that top 1% is not an example of what we did. We helped every single American. It is true that what we did is keep the top tax rate at 39%. So if you're a top payer, you still are today. We did not do anything there. So what we have done is made the employers employ more people to where more people have jobs, to where we'll bring jobs back to America and give us that advantage. But we do have to have a plan for Social Security. Mitch McConnell did not suggest we were going to do anything with Social Security, except we were going to make changes that would allow more people in the system to pay. And that is a great, I think, advantage for each and every one of us.
Sure. Well, that's not what Mitch McConnell said. And I will say this, my opponent has several times suggested that he is in favor of going back to the old idea in 2006 of privatizing Social Security and making sure that this program that has been critical for folks to retire with dignity is undermined. And I think that's something we have to resist. We have to understand that your retirement is on the ballot in this election.
So the next question's on immigration. So a lot of attention's being paid in the last few days to the so-called caravan of thousands of South Americans coming up through Mexico toward the U.S. border. I think it highlights some of the issues about immigration that the country currently faces. What changes do you believe are most important in reforming our current immigration policy, and how do you feel the federal government should address the growing number of people wanting to cross our southern border?
Thank you very much. Once again, my opponent wants it both ways. What I stated with Social Security is every person would be allowed to have an option, and that option would be an IRA, which is guaranteed interest. And I believe that if you do not need the government, then you should not have to count on the government. There are millions of people that do not need to be drawing Social Security. They can take care of themselves. We can reform that system. Republicans in the House put an immigration plan to the vote where every single member of Congress would have a chance to vote one of two ways. Either for a guest worker plan that would give legal status, would give an opportunity for every single person to go through a process, and unless you were a criminal, you could get a work permit. Not one Democratic member of the House voted for that. We had a second bill just days later that allowed the opportunity for every single American to have us join with anybody that has come here illegally to become a pathway to citizenship. A pathway to citizenship that was just literally straight up. It was not a huge fine, it was just an opportunity. Not one Democratic member voted for that. Ladies and gentlemen, what we need to do is we need to control our border. We need to control our border because it is a sovereignty issue and an issue where we've got to take care of people who are in this country. We have millions of children that we have to take care of. We have lots of people who need to go to work, and we need to have a legal process for people to come and not only take part in this country to help build it, but also to pay their taxes that are accordingly, to pay insurance, and to have an opportunity through a legal process. And I think we did that and received not one vote from our friends.
Well, I don't think that me wanting to have it both ways means what you think it means, sir. That doesn't exactly describe it.
Thank you.
Immigration to me is about values. It's a value system that we have to set up to make sure that our immigration system more closely mirrors our values as a country. This is why we need comprehensive reform instead of the piecemeal approaches that we've seen in recent years that I think have undermined so many of our fundamental values. We need to secure our borders, but do it in a smart way. My opponent has said that he supports a wall that would be a waste of money and it would be ineffective and would not actually prevent immigration. I think it would also be a terrible signal to the rest of the world. The signal that we must send to the world is the Statue of Liberty, not a wall that's telling people to stay out. So we must secure our border, but we also have to provide a pathway to citizenship that takes care of people, that gives them a chance, if they have worked hard, if they are following our laws, and if they are here, to remain here and to try and go to the back of the line and find a way to come out of the shadows. I would begin by taking care of the dreamers who are here in the only country they've ever known, kids who I went to Hillcrest High School with, who stood up and did the Pledge of Allegiance every morning with us and consider themselves to be every bit as American as we do. So this is about values, and the plans that my opponent is talking about were not consistent with our values. They made deep changes to our legal immigration system. They included funding for the wall that I oppose and I think would be a waste of time and a waste of money. And that's why they did not get any Democratic votes. And in Congress, I will work to actually get things done on a bipartisan basis, like we almost had when George W. Bush was president and he was working with Ted Kennedy in the Senate, and we had a bill that couldn't get through the House, led by Pete Sessions. Like we almost had recently with the Gang of Eight, when John McCain and other Republicans in the Senate put forward a bill that had bipartisan support, that got out of the Senate, but that languished in the House because folks like Pete Sessions wouldn't vote for it. That's the wrong approach.
30 seconds.
Sure. The gentleman knows that the Senate failed in their own effort. It had nothing to do with the House. Secondly, there was no wall in the guest worker plan, not a wall there. And for you to be misled is not fair. It was a plan that would allow every single person here to go through a process, allowing them to be a guest worker. I think was very fair, and there was no wall involved in that.
So next question from Mr. Allred to begin is, what policies do you favor to ensure public safety and address gun violence?
Well, thank you, Scott. This is a critically important question. When I've spoken with kids at Hillcrest and at Woodrow Wilson, far too often I hear about the concerns that they have about someone coming in who shouldn't have had a weapon and shooting up the school. When I was working with the Town North YMCA doing a youth and government program not long ago at Duncanville High School, all the doors in the high school automatically lock when you close them. And I asked the principal, why do these doors lock like this? Can somebody not go to the bathroom and come back in? They said, well, they have to be open from the inside. This is an effort to prevent anyone coming in who's going to shoot the school from being able to get into the classroom. These are the things that our kids are having to go through in their schools right now. And as somebody who is about to become a father, I refuse to accept that there's nothing we can do about this. And this Congress, led by my opponent, has done nothing to respond to this public safety crisis. We have a public health crisis that has gone unaddressed because the influence of some folks who've decided that we can't do anything at all. And I believe there are things we can do, consistent with our values, consistent with the Second Amendment, consistent with the Supreme Court precedents that have been laid down to make sure that we can protect our people and prevent some of these horrible things that are happening. And it begins with universal background checks. It means on the sale of every single gun, they should have to undergo a background check. There are enormous loopholes right now in the system that Al-Qaeda has asked their supporters to try and exploit, to try and go after Americans because they know our system has so many loopholes. We need to close those loopholes. There are 50 women a month who are dying from intimate partner violence from a gun. When we have no tools in place to take weapons away from domestic abusers, even though we do have tools in place to stop them from getting one. My opponent has also supported a law that would allow reciprocity for concealed handguns, meaning that we would have to, in Texas, accept a concealed handgun license from other states that don't have the same requirements we do. And we do have common sense ideas in place here in Texas, and we should keep those and not have to accept another state that doesn't have our same values.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just heard is an excuse about what the real problem is. It is mental problems, it is mental illness, it is depression, it is children as they grow up. Literally, our young people between the ages of 16 and 21 go through ups and downs. I have had children, not that were this way, but that I saw them in their friends. And that is why we addressed what Mr. Allred claims we did nothing, the Mental Health Parity Act. The Mental Health Parity Act is hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone out to states where we are attempting to allow the states the opportunity to use the money and to find a better and quicker way to where we can deal with this problem. It exists in our schools. It exists in our young people. And what we have allowed is hundreds of millions of dollars to be given to the states to find the process that they would choose best. It was a bipartisan bill. It was a bipartisan bill that was worked on for a number of years and involved the opportunity for us to deal with psychologists and schools, including which we did nothing about, which we did, allowing changes in federal law where if a person that might be your son or daughter goes to college, you can now probably not get their grades, but you can find out whether, in dealing with the school, they have been taking their medicine. It allows a transfer through federal law where parents may be involved in the health care and the mental activities that their children are going through at college. It has allowed us the opportunity for parents to take part with the school in these opportunities to ensure that their children, including them reporting to the school and the school reporting back to them without them being held in any way that was difficult for the child being an adult. So we think this is a very good activity and has been enormously successful as stated by governors.
30 seconds.
I would just say that we are not alone in the developed world and the industrialized world in having instances of mental illness. We are alone, unfortunately, in the industrialized world and the advanced world of having instances of these repeated mass shootings. The congressman did not answer or say anything about closing background check loopholes or doing anything to actually prevent people who should not have a weapon from getting one. This is not just about mental health. We have to do something more on mental health, absolutely. But that is not the only component, and to say it is disingenuous.
So give everyone a reminder that we are going to take some questions from the audience, and if you have a card and hopefully a pen, and Jeff will collect those, and we'll try to get to some of those as we move along in the debate. So next question for Congressman Sessions. During your campaign, what is the number one issue you've heard raised by the constituents in District 32, and what is your response to this concern?
Thank you very much. The biggest concern that I have heard is people who talk about health care. The availability of health care. There are many, many, many people who are self-employed, many people who have their own small businesses, and they are seeking the opportunity to have the same plan that was passed by the House, close, but we're not sure exactly where the Senate would be. And so what we're doing is taking this forward with a plan that would allow every single person to have the tax advantage. The Senate somehow believes that what we ought to do is to send this money back to states and let the states deal with it. And that might be one of the best options, but I think the best option is to allow every single American to have a tax credit, allowing small business people a chance to deduct straight up January 1st or to apply a tax credit of $9,000 per family. This would immediately allow them to buy into a larger group plan, allowing them the same opportunity and advantage that a large employer in your community might have. This would allow families a better opportunity to make sure that they take care of the health of their own children. Moving people to the group plan like a large business, I believe, is the best answer, and unanimously, when people hear about that, they think that is a better idea than what we have.
Well, healthcare is by far the number one issue that people talk to me about. And the day that Congressman Sessions voted for the AHCA, the day that he voted to take away healthcare from over 20 million Americans, to remove protections for pre-existing conditions, I actually held my first public event in East Dallas at the Corner Market. And a woman named Natalie came to my event. She was an attorney, a graduate of Stanford Law School, married to an SMU law professor. And she told me that she'd come from chemotherapy that day and that she had stage 4 cancer. And as I got to know her, I understood that she was spending her last years of her life fighting to live as long as she could so that her daughters would know her. And that she came to my event that day because she was worried about future moms like her who would lose their health care under the plan that Congressman Sessions voted for. that she was worried about the bad old days of lifetime caps coming back, because she knew she would have blown through any lifetime caps in the first couple of weeks of her treatment. And Natalie spent the final months of her life campaigning, posting videos, sending letters to the editor, talking to all of her friends, doing everything she could to talk about the importance of health care. Not for herself, she had health care. She was worried about future moms and other people like her down the road. This is such a personal issue. You know, my good friend Miguel Solis's daughter was born with a heart defect. She had to have a heart transplant. She has over $4 million already in her very, very young, beautiful life of medical bills. She has a pre-existing condition for life. My mom is a breast cancer survivor. My wife is pregnant right now. That's a pre-existing condition. I met an 87-year-old woman who told me, honey, I am a pre-existing condition. These are not political issues, but they've become this way because there have been efforts in Congress to roll back a plan that they think belonged to a Democratic president. That's the only reason they oppose it. In Congress, I will stand up efforts to do that.
30 seconds.
That is an absolute lie. The issue is guarantee issue, the availability of you to be able to get health care. We have not ever had a problem, and do not today, of on this issue of pre-existing condition. I have a Down syndrome son. I would never vote for us to do anything different. But the issue of guarantee where you can get insurance is the question. And that is where we are trying to make sure that every single person would be able to have insurance. There is nothing contained in those policies that would offer or deny a pre-existing condition. Those are against the law. Those were in all of our bills. Just like the 26-year-old, we have not changed that. What we did is allow an opportunity.
Thank you. So the next question is on the speaker. So no matter who is in the majority, we know that we'll have a new speaker in the next House of Representatives. If you win and your party's in control, what do you feel is the most important characteristic of an effective speaker, and who are some of the members you would consider voting for in that role?
Well, I would just say that nothing I said was a lie. And that, because I was telling, first of all, a first-hand story. Second of all, you can Google what the AHCA did. It's not my opinion that it removed protections for pre-existing conditions. I don't feel that way. This is just a fact. And you can look it up, and I'm thankful now that we're in the information age in which you no longer have to wonder which one of us is telling the truth. When it comes to the next speaker, I am going to look at who's running and see what they have to say. I feel very similar to it than I do to who I will vote for in 2020 for president. I don't know who's running, I don't know what their plans are, and I don't know who I will support yet. But what I will require is that I believe one of the first bills out of the next Congress must be an infrastructure bill. And that we need it here in North Texas. President Trump has said that he wanted to do this. I believe that we can get it done, and I will require whoever has my support to make sure that they do that. But I also want to make sure that we are not going there to do what the Republicans in Congress did when they took control during the Obama presidency. I am not going there to gum up the works, to say no to every single thing, to try and make sure that nothing comes out of the Congress, to be a do-nothing, know-nothing Congress. I want to get things done for North Texas. And if that means that they give President Trump and others what they would maybe call victories, that's okay with me. We need to invest in infrastructure. We need to lower the cost of prescription drugs. We need to make sure we invest in job training programs to fill the positions we have here that give people a chance to get into a career instead of just a job. All three of those things that I just mentioned are things that at one time or another Donald Trump has said he wants to do. I'm willing to work with him on it because it's good for North Texas, and that's the most important thing to me. My number one constituent will be my family and the people who I grew up with here. And I will make sure that I always put them first ahead of any partisan concerns or anything else.
Thank you very much. I think what's going to happen is that we will see where there are probably 4 or 5 Republicans that run for Speaker. They will come from a list of people who I believe are pro-business, who support the free enterprise system, and want to make sure that we address the issues. Those issues involve 3 things. On the Republican side, number 1, giving us the best answer on health care, which I believe is possible. Number 2, what I believe is available now that we've done the votes is a guest worker plan. And number 3, to make our tax code permanent. We call that Tax 2.0, and that will allow an opportunity for every single American to have a long-term opportunity at a job and for business to be able to regrow their business here in this country. It's important to note that while I do appreciate the gentleman wanting to do something about infrastructure, he's got to tell us how he's going to pay for it. We spend about $800 billion a year on transportation. We attempt to make sure that when we spend that, we do that out of gasoline tax that comes in, and then it comes back out to the states. We are attempting to give the states more latitude and flexibility in not only their decision making, but an opportunity to make those work better. So I would want to hear from the gentleman exactly how he's going to do that, because simply to take another extra $1 trillion would mean that we would raise the debt an extra $1 trillion. So I don't think you can have it both ways when what we need is a public-private partnership where we actually encourage and want to build our infrastructure, but do it in such a way that does not add to our debt.
30 seconds.
I'm so glad that the congressman is now concerned with fiscal responsibility after voting for an irresponsible tax bill that exploded the deficit. And I will say, sir, you voted for it before you knew what the CBO score was, which is a little bit like buying a house before you know the cost of it. And so to say now, oh, well, you can't invest in infrastructure, that's just kind of the height of irresponsibility here. This is not my opinion that we need to invest in this. The College of Engineers has said that our infrastructure is crumbling. We need to make sure that our bridges don't fall down, that we can continue to grow. Every dollar we put into infrastructure, we get more back. All we have to do is look at the interstate highway system for evidence of that.
Here's the next question. This is a question from the audience. So many students are leaving college and other living wage earning certification programs burdened with massive debt. How can we meet our workforce needs without this problem and address it?
Well, I don't know if it's possible to get out of school without debt. What I do know is that you need a job to be able to pay for it. My son graduates from medical school this next year, and he and his colleagues are facing exactly what we are talking about. And that is that many of these students have taken out loans, not only for the 4 years of college, also the 4, 5, 6 years worth of professional degree. What we need is a system that is vibrant, that allows them an opportunity to have a job as opposed to a government job, whereby we do not take over the healthcare system, but where we offer an opportunity for them to better able to deduct those. And companies, when they make money, they are in many times allowing and encouraging those employees. I don't know what I did differently. There it is. It's allowing them the opportunity to give money back and to help pay tuition. And many, many, many companies do this today. They actually help that employee by coming to work and doing their work every day. They pay many parts of their college tuition. This has been accelerated because companies now have more money back. They have more money back and they're spending it not just on their employees, but the benefits that they have. So I've never missed a day in 39 years of work. I go to work every day. We want to encourage work. We want to encourage the opportunity to have benefits. But what we want is companies to work with their employees and help them pay down the debt, because they're actually, it's part of the training program that made them available to come to a marketplace. And I think that companies value that, are more and more doing that now that they have more money as a result of the tax cut.
Well, this is an issue that I talk to young people about all the time. We have $1.3 trillion in student loan debt in this country. It's our second highest source of individual debt, is student loan debt. Our kids are graduating with a mortgage payment. And when you see reports saying that millennials are putting off starting a family, millennials are putting off buying a new home, millennials are not spending their money, it's not because they don't want to. It's because they can't afford to, because they're graduating with so much debt. And so we must do something to address the rising costs of higher education, because we are moving towards a future of work in which there will be very little low-skilled work, because it will be automated. Half of our workforce will be automated in the next couple of decades. And so we will only have high-skilled work. And so how are we going to get people those skills if we're asking them to take on $50, $100, $150, $200,000 in debt in order to get them. We have to do something about this. I think that we can offer a couple of different ways. Number one, we need to have programs to alleviate the student loan debt that students have right now. If you're willing to serve your country in AmeriCorps or any other program that is, I think, has a public good, we should assume some of your debt, because we need to encourage people getting involved in their own society, and we also need to help out with that cost. We also need to make sure that people can renegotiate the interest prices or the interest rates on their student loan debt, so they can get them down as low as possible. And then we need to be investing in apprenticeship programs, trade schools, and vocational training in our high schools to make sure that you can graduate from high school or from a community college or a technical school with a livable skill that will allow you to get into a good job right away with as little debt as possible. That's good for our economy, and it's good for all of us.
30 seconds.
All this exists today, and we spend $17 billion on a training program right now of after school. $17 billion that we try and help not only the free market, but help the opportunity for second and third chance people. I've been to Gary Job Corps Center down in Central Texas and see where we're taking people who may not have gotten it the first, second, or third time, but still want that opportunity. Last, government does pay these costs for student loans, and it's very much alive and well today.
The next question begins with Mr. Allred, again from the audience. In an era where many, if not most people, consume news and opinion pieces from politically biased sources, how do you bridge that social divide?
Well, it is a good question, and the increasing siloing of our news sources and of our lives is contributing to the rise of some of the hyperpartisanship that we're seeing. And it's incumbent upon all of us to be able to step outside of those bubbles to try and engage with folks who might have different ideas than us, but who are Americans, who are fellow Texans, who are folks who we should be able to find common ground with. I believe very strongly in the 80-20 rule, that we agree on 80% of the things with our friends on the other side, and that we disagree on maybe 20% of them. And we spend far too much time and effort on just those 20%, instead of talking about the 80% that we do agree upon. I want to be someone who can work on a bipartisan basis to get things done. My opponent has been a hyperpartisan. There's just no other way to put it. He speaks in hyperpartisan terms. He is governed in a hyperpartisan manner. He uses the Democrats as the foil for everything. Nancy Pelosi is the foil for everything. If you were playing a drinking game and you had to drink every time my opponent says Nancy Pelosi, you wouldn't have a rough morning. And that is not the way I see the world. I grew up here in Dallas knowing a lot of folks who voted lots of different ways. Went to Baylor and had a lot of friends who were on the other side. I think that there's a lot that we agree upon. I think there are good people on both sides who care about our country. And what we need to work on and move towards is focusing on those things we agree about and trying to accept our fundamental values first and foremost that underlie either party of freedom, justice, equality, that we are all Americans and that we're all in the same boat and we should be pulling in the same direction. That's something I'll try and foster in Congress.
Thank you very much. I've tried to foster this same activity back home. In February, a year ago, almost a year and a half ago, I received a call at the office on a President's weekend where I took the call myself. And in that process, I got a call from the head of the National Organization of Women, who was calling to ask me, they thought I was a staff member, to have a meeting with them. And I told her I'd be pleased to. And she said, when? And I said, give me 15 minutes and I'll meet you. She said, no, how about next weekend? The next weekend, I sat down with 40 women from the National Organization of Women. This is 2 years ago. And we had a very pleasant and thoughtful conversation where they were professional and so was I. I answered every single question with specificity. I then was invited with the Democratic Club of Highland Park. And I went to a home where there were about 20 of them. And I soon found out, as they said, they were not interested in me hearing their ideas. They were only there to beat me. I asked them specifically about ideas about health care, ideas about immigration, and a young doctor who's a dermatologist said, "You don't get it. We're not going to negotiate. We're going to beat you." I then had a town hall meeting. A town hall meeting where groups of people stood up with placards telling people how to yell and scream. The question about the NIH, the placard got wrong and they started yelling and screaming at me. And I said, "You guys have to listen. You are for the NIH. You are for the opportunity for us to solve problems through academia and through research." And it is true. They were yelling and screaming so loud that it was not a thoughtful, artful conversation. And I would like to see us get to that point, because it does us no good to yell and scream if we're not listening and talking back and forth to each other.
30 seconds.
Well, I know some of the women that Congressman Sessions met with, and I believe that the meeting went very differently than how he described it. But I will say that was a perfect encapsulation of what I am talking about.
So the next question, again from the audience, we'll start with Congressman Sessions. Both the Dallas ISD and Richardson ISD make up a large part of Texas District 32. Have you taken a position on the tax ratification elections for these two school districts? And what are your overall views on how to work at the national level on public school finance?
Thank you very much. By the way, I did go because I was invited to both of those, and I gleefully went and presented myself and answered every question that they had.
Congratulations, sir.
Yeah. The federal government does have a responsibility in local education, and it's called IDEA, and it is the opportunity for the federal government to more fully fund the laws that we have put for those dealing with what might be disabled or special education. I have made sure that every single year that we have been in Congress, we have had an opportunity to up the amount of money and the percent that would be put to those issues and ideas. I'm pleased to tell you that we have spent a great deal of time passing a bill which allows special education and or those with disabilities their parents a chance to save more money for their education. This was a bipartisan bill. It was agreement that we had to work on both sides, but it was done primarily through the leadership of myself and two other people in the House. We are going to continue to focus on the disability and the issue for special education. What we should do is allow the flexibility for local people to run their own schools. And that's why we did away with, as a demand from teachers all over this country, of No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was not a positive education process. It in fact put huge burdens on teachers. So I would say to you that we are funding our schools. We need to fund our schools. We need to take a better opportunity to give them more money. As chairman of the board of the East Dallas Chamber, I wholeheartedly supported that, as well as issues of economic concern and transportation, other issues. And I have a history of doing that, including supporting DART, because I believe it's the right thing to do.
2 minutes.
Well, I would just note that the congressman wants credit for having met with his constituents. So we will give you credit for that. I think that that is part of the job, sir. It's part of the job, and you should do that. And you should take those meetings, and you shouldn't lie about how the meetings went afterwards. When it comes to education, most of our funding, of course, is determined at the state and local level. And I am a DISD resident. My mom taught in DISD, and I'm a graduate of DISD. I support the DISD bill for additional funding, and I think that we all should support it. DISD is moving in the right direction, and we need to continue that progress. At the federal level, there are important investments that I think we need to be making, and I have to take a little bit of issue with what the congressman said, because it begins with pre-K, and the congressman has repeatedly tried to say that he supports pre-K, but he has voted many times for budgets out of the House that made deep cuts to the main program that we pay for pre-K at the federal level through, which is the Head Start program. And so his voting record does not support his statements on that. Pre-K is the most important investment that we make in our education system at the federal level. For every dollar we put in, we get at least $8 back. I've seen some studies that say as much as 14. It is important for the kids and for their early development. It's also important for the families. States and localities that have expanded pre-K have seen huge increases in the number of women who enter the workforce because of the burden that it takes off of them in terms of childcare. So pre-K is part of it. As the son of a teacher, the nephew of a teacher, and the grandson of a teacher, I know that we must invest in teacher pay and recruitment and training. To have the best teacher workforce in the world, we need to bring our best and brightest into teaching and then keep them there by paying them what they're worth. And we do that, we can help do that at the federal level. This is something that is really important to me. All of the research says that the most important thing we can give a kid when they're in our classroom is a good teacher. It's not the class size, which is very important. It's not the facilities, which are very important. It's the quality of their teacher.
So 30 seconds.
Well, all I'd say is that the starting salary of a DISD teacher was $10,000 above that of a police officer, starting police officer salary. And I think that our public servants all deserve that respect and opportunity. They are people who get up and go not only to school, but they make house calls when they're firefighters and police officers. And that is why I've been an active part of trying to make sure that our public servants have an opportunity not only to have good and better housing that's local, but an opportunity to have more take-home pay. And I am in favor of every bit of that. But the best thing that we've done is to provide an economic base that can pay for those people.
So this will be the last question before the final statements, again from the audience. I think it involves impeachment, basically, that conversation. If Trump fires Rosenstein and replaces him with someone who will halt the Mueller investigation, should Congress take action?
Well, I would just say I don't think there's any need for us to pit police officers against teachers. We can pay both. And they should be paid what they're worth. And I take offense almost at the suggestion that I was pitting police officers against teachers. When it comes to talking about Rod Rosenstein, I worked with Rod Rosenstein in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Greenbelt, Maryland. And I believe that he is a public servant who puts our country first. He should remain in his position. If something were to happen, and I don't know that something will, we must protect the Mueller investigation and make sure that it goes through its full process. This is something that shouldn't be a partisan issue. We should be able to get to the bottom of what happened in the 2016 election without partisan interference. Unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case in this Congress. We have seen that there's only one party interested in finding out how we can secure our elections against attack. You know, when you ride the tiger, you can't get off because the tiger might eat you. Right now, it may be true that largely foreign interference is coming after Democrats. That will not always be true. We should be able to unite across party lines to say that it is in no one's interest to allow foreign interference in our elections. Only Americans should determine where we go as a country and what we do. And if someone does get involved, we should gang up together and say, get out of our election. You know, in the 1930s, Adolf Hitler looked across the English Channel and said, I see Winston Churchill as a future enemy. And he tried to support Churchill's opponent in his race for Parliament. So Churchill's constituents sent him back to Parliament with an even larger percentage of the vote. That's the reaction I'd like to see from us here in this country, that there's something more important than partisanship, that we can come together around the idea that we should figure out what happened and prevent it from happening again.
2 minutes.
Thank you very much. You know, the Mueller investigation is an important one. My father served as director of the FBI for President Reagan and President Bush and President Clinton. And we need to make sure that the rule of law and that the availability of finding out the facts and the reasoning and the law behind that is completed. I have been very much aware of what the former director was doing. He was put in place for a reason, and he will get to the bottom line and the facts of the case, and I think that's important. But the bottom line is that I've not seen any evidence that the president would like to unilaterally make a decision to fire Rod Rosenstein. I've not seen that. I think the president, if he did choose to go this direction, would be making a mistake. But I've seen nothing along that line. I think that this investigation should under the review, as it has been under a judge, is encouraging them to stay to the facts of the case and deliver their product. I believe that we've been told that will be done by the end of the year, and I believe that that is worthy for them to have $500 million as they have used to properly account to the American people what they think and what they saw. The bottom line is no one would want interference from an outside nation. It would be repugnant for us to believe that it would be okay for somebody to do something, but it is up to this investigation. I look forward to seeing the results, and I will tell you, Bob Moeller is a very fair and decent man who, as former director, knows not just the inside workings of criminals, but also knows how to effectively move that issue forward. And I hope and think that is happening and will happen.
So 30 seconds.
Well, I would just say that I'm glad to hear the Congressman say that. We should have bipartisan agreement on it. I believe that he should not have blocked extra funding for the states in this recent session of Congress to allow us to secure our elections. And that was something that shouldn't have been a partisan issue. It was reported in the Washington Post that in his capacity as chairman of the Rules Committee, Pete Sessions was personally responsible for blocking that legislation. I think that was a mistake.
Okay, so now we will go to the final statements. So each candidate will have 3 minutes to talk, and we'll start with Congressman Sessions.
Thank you very much. The opportunity to be back before you is important to you also. You also, to make sure that you do understand and that I understand that this election will have enormous repercussions, well, if I can even talk, repercussions, not only to America, but also the world. The world is now looking at the United States through a different lens, and that is a lens of economic development, growth, and opportunity. We are encouraging American business and Americans to not only go to work, but to produce the very best of goods and services as they might be available across the country. This is encouraging American, entrepreneurial spirit. It is giving us a chance to roar back. You have seen the stock market, which is a leading edge indicator, not only of the world, but of the United States. You have seen our stock market understand that we have to lead the world, or the world does not have a leader that is aiming for the very best. And in that process, you've seen our stock market rise rather dramatically, allowing not only economic prowess of this country, but of the companies that make up America that are called employers. These employers hire Americans to do their job. We send about 40% of everything that we make in this country somewhere overseas. It's an American-made product that has made the world rely on America, and America rely upon a tax system that will be fair. We have gone from the highest tax rate in the world, 39% for corporate rate, plus a high state tax rate, to where our products and services were not competitive overseas. We have changed this. We've seen $50 billion from around the world come to America to make us stronger, because we are stable and we're economic viable, because we have employees that will do the very best for their country and for their employer. Lastly, I will continue to make sure that our United States military has the money that they need to make sure that they keep America and Americans and our allies safe. And this is not a small task, because the world has never been more dangerous than it is today. And I will continue to work for not only peace and prosperity, but the opportunity for every single American to have freedom in their own homes, in their own businesses, and to make America stronger. I'd like to ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
3 minutes.
Well, Thank you all so much for being here this morning. For those of you who joined us through the live stream, thank you for being engaged in our democracy. This is the most important thing for us in this election, I think, is to make sure that our voices are truly heard. And I think what you have heard this morning are two very different views of where we're going to go together as a region and as a country. I think this is a perfect example of why we so desperately need fresh ideas and new leadership, that we need to be heading in a new direction to make sure that our things that are going well here continue, but that we don't have a Washington that is holding us back. I believe in many ways North Texas has done well in spite of the chaos and the bipartisan bickering and the lack of action coming out of DC. We can do so much better than this. There are fundamental values that are at risk in this election that we all must stand up for, that cross party lines, that cross considerations of class, race, anything else. The idea that we're all in this together, that the press is not the enemy of the people, but that they are a safeguard against tyranny, that all the ideas that we put in our foundational documents about freedom, justice, and equality that we have never quite achieved, but that we are working towards, are at stake. You know, I could have never imagined that I would be the Democratic nominee for Congress running here in my hometown that has given me so much. My story is an unlikely one, but it's a story that's only made possible because we already are a great country. No one needs to make us great again. We are great because we give people a chance. We're great because we are good. We are great because the facts are on our side, and that's why we don't have to make them up. And the rest of the world has looked to us for leadership for decades because of that, because we have been that shining light. We have been that beacon. That light has been dimmed recently. The rest of the world is no longer looking at us the same way. And here in North Texas, as this chaos has been going on in Washington, there are so many things that we need to get done that haven't been done. There are families who need someone on their side. There are teachers who need someone to support them. This entire community needs to have an advocate that will do more than come back once for one town hall and say to its constituents, your issue is that you don't know how to listen. As a representative, I will always listen to you. We may not agree on every single thing, but I promise you this, I will show you the respect and the decency to come back and talk to you and to explain to you why I've done what I've done. That's what we deserve here. This is a representative democracy, one that relies upon the people being put first. I will put you first in Congress, and I ask for your vote.
So again, thank you to both candidates for being here. Thank you for being here as well. I think I'm preaching to the choir when I say make sure you go vote.